Welcome to this episode of School of Humankind Meet the Faculty. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing you to Wyndham James, who, with our mission of having wonderful discussions and talking about everything you need in life that you don't learn at school, Wyndham fits right in. So happy to have him here. Now, Wyndham, he helps help people who are sort of busy mid-career professionals really find themselves again. And you've got this great new, new to me, methodology called creating their blueprint. And
Yep,
you are the blueprint coach.
I am.
So as we go into this, I would love to start out with just finding sort of your origin story. You know, those Marvel characters, they all have an
Yeah, yeah,
origin story of what made
yeah,
them turn the way they did. What is
yeah.
that story for you, Wyndham?
Thank you, Angela. I am delighted to be part of School of Humankind. I completely agree with both yours and John's mission on this, that we need more and deeper human connection, and we're not taught it as kids, and we're not taught it in the workplace. In my experience, you end up at a place in your life where things aren't working. You don't know why. You don't have the tools. You don't want to talk to anybody about it because the voice in our heads tells us it's just you and you're the problem. So having opportunities to talk about these things through School of Humankind, I think, is immensely powerful.
So you're telling
Um,
me that we're all damaged and we just don't know it.
yeah,
And we're
I
all just
am.
swimming through life and
Yeah,
trying to make the best of it. Okay.
yeah, I think so. And it's an interesting one. The damaged is, for years and years and years, I was firmly convinced that I was broken, and I couldn't get my head to a place where broken was fixable. Broken seemed a very final state to me, and that's limitations of my own thinking. Um, but I've got to a point where one of the things I tend to do is I identify language that isn't serving me, and I quarantine it until I can rehabilitate it, because the language is so emotive in many cases that our blueprint, I will get to the origin story, but the blueprint, we all have a blueprint, and our blueprint's purpose is to automate our reactions to what's going on around us and to us. And it's driven by the ancient brain. So its primary purpose is to keep us alive. It has no real interest in us thriving. It has no real interest in happiness or joy or gratitude or any of those things. It's simply what is most likely to keep us alive. So we have all these learned behaviors from when we were kids, that until we bring our awareness to them and start to interrupt that automatic process, we are on autopilot for most of our lives. And I think that was true for me. And the origin of it was I had a super normal upbringing. I had older brother and sister, younger stepbrother and sister, lots of love in the family, all of those things. And yet, very early in my life, I created an identity for myself that tripped me up very quickly. So when I was 11, the first thing I was ever any good at was running. I was a competitive cross-country runner, and I was better than everybody else of my age. So the identity I created was winning runner. It wasn't that I was running because I enjoyed it. I did. But the emphasis was on winning, and I had limited control over whether I would win. And so at a relatively young age, you stop winning, body changes, your attitudes change, the things you're looking to pursue, 17, 18, start to change. And it had set an expectation in me far beyond a reasonable expectation. And I think it's certainly, for me, it was, I don't look back on it and think this was imposed on me. I think lots of our conditioning is, but this particular one, I think I created myself. And
Which
I,
is like kind of encouraging to us parents because, we worry that we're going to screw up our kids when in fact so much of it is you provide an environment, an X environment, and it's kind of at certain point, it's up to the kids, up to ourselves. How do we take that and how do we use it to
yeah,
create, more thriving versus destructive? And
yeah,
it's really interesting, and I hope you touch on like what that point was for you to realize that and to create that change because some people don't get to that point.
yeah.
And
It's a really interesting and really important point, because I firmly believe in the classic, I talk about those Instagram one-liners. This one, there is a choice in every moment, is 100% true. And yet that choice only becomes active when we become aware that it is true. Whereas so much of our conditioning shuts down our curiosity, it pigeonholes us, it gives us, or creates beliefs and truths that become the trigger for the automation of our blueprints. And if those truths and beliefs are restrictive or contracting for us as human beings, then over time and patterns of behavior and continual reinforcement, they get very strong. And even the idea that there could be something different can seem too big a stretch. So the choice is always there, but it only becomes active when we sit down and go, oh, actually, all of these thoughts and feelings and stories are not real. I have a choice to address them. Um, and when that happened for me, oh, far too long. So from having this kind of identity that I had to win, um, I very soon became deeply afraid of failure,
mm,
because the identity I had created for myself was dependent on me winning, was dependent on me succeeding. And where I couldn't, or I was afraid I would fail, I quickly withdrew my effort,
right,
because the argument in my head was, well, it's no judgment on you because you didn't really try very hard. So it's okay because you
right.
didn't give it 100%. And sadly, that was me for 30 years,
Oh my gosh.
34 years, something like that.
Yeah.
So
And that is
having,
a hard mindset to be in because you're constantly failing, but kind of in the shadows.
yeah,
It's building up the negative feelings in you constantly.
yeah,
And I love that, it's a perfect example of the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset, which I think maybe people of our generation were very much fixed, very much like, what's the outcome instead of what is my growth?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I still struggle with
Yeah,
disconnecting from the outcome. I think you're 100% right. It is all about the process. That's where all the lessons are. That's where the growth is. And you don't have to look very far to talk to people or see people or read stuff from people where they've achieved these amazing things and the achievement is hollow. It maybe lasts a fraction of a second, this sense of joy or achievement or success or whatever it might be. And very quickly they realize, now what? I thought that was going to be me done for, I thought I was going to be happy. I was going to be um, at peace for the rest of my life. And just isn't the way it works. So I had this mindset at 15, um, went off to university, initially went to do a law degree, hated law. What I really wanted to do was drama and theatre. Did a year of law really to placate my mum. So my mum had said, you need a strong degree. Drama and theatre isn't that. Go and do law. So I did a year of law, dropped out. So, but interestingly, I didn't view that as a failure.
yeah,
It
that
was
is
like,
interesting.
actually, I'm going to take control of this because I hate it. So I'm
Right.
not going to do it. Dropped out, went to do drama and theatre for 3 years. with what I thought was the hope of becoming an actor. But that fear of failure was consistently being kind of reinforced through the stories I was telling myself. And if you're going to be an actor, you're going to be rejected a lot.
A lot. Yes.
Yeah. And
That's the hard one.
yeah, and I didn't have the kind of resilience for that. And at the time I told myself, it's because you don't really want to do it. You've tricked yourself into thinking you want to pursue this career. Obviously you don't, or you would be able to put up with the rejection because it's part of it. So logically and intellectually I could understand that, but like in my body, in my heart and soul, I was not feeling that. And I fell into sales. And I say fell into sales because there are millions of sales jobs. They're not that difficult to get. They're very difficult to keep. But that kind of became my career for 20 years. I worked in sales for 20 years, lots of different companies, lots of different products and services, kind of had some measure of success. But the problem for me was always the only thing I took from those jobs was finance, was money, was pay. And I'm not materially motivated. It's not that important to me. I like nice things, of course, but it isn't enough of a motivation for somebody just to dangle more money. It's like, I don't care. But I found myself I felt trapped in that career because I didn't know what it was that I really wanted to do. I didn't have the confidence to say, actually, I am deeply creative, and to spend my time writing or speaking or whatever it might be is a worthwhile expenditure of my time. I didn't have that confidence. And so I kind of just went round this paralysis loop of, well, I hate my job. There must be something wrong with me. What else can I do? Not being able to answer that question, so just going around the loop again. And what I found and what I speak to all of my clients about is most people come to create change in their life when the fear of the known discomfort of what they have, so the despair, the unhappiness, the whatever it might be, is greater than our fear of change. Because change is uncertainty, and that ancient part of our brain doesn't like uncertainty. So it will always feed us a storyline that says, but you're surviving where you are. You don't know what will happen if you change. It could be much worse. And we even have kind of sayings that reinforce it. It's like out of the frying pan into the fire. The grass isn't always greener. We have these kind of, certainly in the UK, I don't know how well that transposes to Canada, but we have these sayings that basically say, put up, it's better the devil you know than the devil you don't. And it's like, but it might not be a devil. It's like, this is, and so for me, it was 20 years of gradual erosion of what little confidence I had left, to the point where I just couldn't carry on anymore, because the fear of, I knew it would be a continuous downward trajectory from where I was, which was really low. And it was, I cannot do this anymore.
And I was, just the figurative, illustrative way you're describing it is, I think when you're starting to feel that despair, there's so many people who, like you said, put up with it. And what I feel that they end up doing is numbing their emotions, numbing themselves from real life. Because what I'm also hearing from you is your authentic self. The person you really want to be keeps calling you, keeps tapping at your door like, hey, you are not doing what you're supposed to be doing. This is not fulfilling. Yet what you mentioned about your animal brain is telling you, but you're living, you're still surviving. Forget this happiness stuff. It's okay. You just got to survive. And that's, the animal brain's job is, physical threats. I'm going to deal with that. Emotional, put up with it because you're okay. So
Yeah,
I think our human desire to actually find more meaning is often stifled by ourselves.
absolutely.
We're our biggest hurdle to get over.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're talking about the emotional side of things as well. I think where I've got to and what I've come to realize is we get no training in our emotions,
Yeah. Well,
none whatsoever.
actually, we get a lot. It's like, stop crying.
Can't have that one. That
Yeah,
one's not appropriate.
that one is
Don't
not.
embarrass us with that one.
Yeah.
Don't make a scene. Don't make a fuss. Keep your voice down. All those things. So, and this is one of those things that are that blueprint philosophy. All of Not all. There are sort of three phases to the blueprint philosophy. And the first to the blueprint, the first is from sort of our birth to when we gain independence in our life, whether that's go to university or go into the work environment. And all of those, we have no choice as a kid. We have no awareness. So we don't understand everything that's going on. But we do understand that we have to be involved. We have to remain in the groups that we are presented to. That's the ancient brain telling us you cannot be ejected from this group. If you do, almost guaranteed death, because that's what it would have been tens of thousands of years ago. So we have a natural ability to adapt to, I call them inclusion criteria. So every group we are a part of has inclusion criteria, and they fall into 5 categories. They're explicit, implied, assumed. That assumed one is on us. They are inconsistent, or they could be insincere. But those first 3, explicit, implied, and assumed, if you think of our family environment, we are taught how to behave. Our parents tell us what is acceptable. And when we behave outside the boundaries of what we are told is acceptable, we get punished in some way. So our survival instinct is saying, okay, you can't do that, even though we're children and we're just being kids. And part of that is the emotional training that we get. You're absolutely right. We do get emotional training, but it is not in how to live with our emotions. And all our emotions is information. Like you were saying, it's like our deep soul, our purpose, our passion, however you want to refer to it, just gently saying, you should have a look at this because something is not as you would benefit from. Something is wrong. We use that word. But we only come to that when we get to kind of the end of phase 2 of our blueprint. So we have the phase 1 blueprint is when we're growing up, and all those truths and beliefs are given, dictated, rarely kind of from our own experience. Or they can be from our own experience, but it's always in interacting with the reaction of somebody else who is also operating from a blueprint that they are probably not aware of. So the second phase is when we go into the workplace, and there will be new inclusion criteria in the workplace. And then the third phase is where we write our own blueprint. But most of us, it takes us to bottom out to get to that point where we go, I cannot keep doing this. I don't know what the answer is, but I cannot keep doing it. That quiet voice inside is just getting louder and louder and louder until we kind of go, I'm going to have to do something.
Yeah, and I venture to guess some people might not ever get there,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
which is a big.
absolutely. And I think we're sort of at this really perfect time. I know the world is a mess,
No,
and
no, no, it's not. Beautiful.
you're right. The world is beautiful. Human beings are a mess, but but we're at this. I think we're at a point where if I go back to my parents, nobody was talking about mental health. Nobody was talking about purpose. Nobody was talking about living a life you want to live. Everybody was coming out of their education at whatever age it was, getting a job, looking to try to buy a house, having a family, raising your kids, working until you can retire, and then trying to enjoy some retirement. But that's all up in the air now. The conversations are increasing where all of us are saying, I want more than that. And I think I deserve more. Especially with my last corporate job was I worked for a company that ran recruitment teams for their clients. And there is a big generational shift every generation. And now we have millennials get absolutely tanked and Gen Z get absolutely tanked for not being resilient, for not being this, not being that, not being the other. Whereas actually what I think they're doing is kind of, there may be some truth in that because of the training and teaching and upbringings they have. But I think fundamentally they're saying, we don't believe in that model. I don't get it. What do I get from this? So the models of employment are shifting because the people who businesses need are saying, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've noticed that as well. And, as you're talking about generational and we think about our parents, for instance, my dad went through World War II as a
Yeah.
child. So there's a different experience, there's a different reality. Like if I don't ever have, like, I think he struggled to survive for 2 years as a young child. So having that experience compared to what I grew up with, I never had to worry about my next meal,
Yeah,
let's just
absolutely.
say. And then I'm doing the same for my kids. So their jumping off point into life is so much different.
Yeah.
It's, they've never lacked for anything and probably had too much. So going out into the workforce, their demands are different.
Yeah.
And yes, they don't have the same start where, we still remember, we're still thankful for more because we have seen our parents come from way less.
Yeah.
So we're kind of in between that generation, but with the recognition that the workforce jobs have to change to attract the new generation because they're all we've got. And I want
Yeah.
my pension, damn it. They're the ones paying into our social
Yeah.
system, so we need to make it work somehow.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting because exactly as you say, the less outright survival striving we need to do, which let's face it, that was the intention my parents had. It was like they wanted to give me more opportunity.
Yeah.
What that does, I think, and on a generation by generation basis, it gives us more time to, well, I don't have to put my energy into that survival piece. So what do I really want? Well, actually, this sucks. I don't want to do this. I'm not going to do it. I'm leaving. I'm going to go and do something else. So that kind of search for passion
Enlightenment.
and meaning, yeah, and enlightenment, yeah. But on a day-to-day basis,
Yeah.
that idea that you can find something that pays you money as a job that you enjoy. That is possible.
Yeah.
Whereas when I went into the workforce, it was like, you have to get a job because your bank manager is getting very angry.
Yeah.
So just take a job. Everybody hates their job. It's fine.
Yeah. Because you
It's
got to
not
pay your
fine.
rent.
Exactly. And those pressures are still very real. And the cost of living is extraordinary. Especially for young people who
Yeah.
don't have that 20 years of, well, I've climbed the ladder and things are expensive now, but I'm in a position where I've had my success in inverted commas. So it's staggeringly difficult. And I'm here for when people go, I'm not going to do it. No, that's what you want, or rather, that's what you want me to do. But where's the benefit for me? And I think we misinterpret this idea of selfishness, that we're taught selfishness is a bad thing. And actually, it's like, well, actually, if I put myself first, not specifically at the detriment of other people, but if I can connect with myself to understand what it is I really want, where I really want to be, who I want to be, and how I want to be, then everybody around me benefits. because I then become this positive energy rather than the hideous Sunday morning doom I felt for 20 years. And it was visceral. I'm far enough away from it now that I can't quite remember it, but I can remember how awful it was. And so I think in part it's what the blueprint philosophy is about. It's understand how you have got to where you are. And there are two really key principles. One is it's not your fault. So for the longest time, I misinterpreted those kind of, when people say things like, oh, we're responsible for the lives we have, 100% true. Yeah, we are. And it goes back to that idea of we only have a choice if we're aware we have a choice. So if we lack that awareness, then it's like, well, yes, the onus is always going to be on me to create change. And it's okay that I haven't. It's not my fault that I am where I am. It is most definitely my problem, not anybody else's.
And
I
I
think
finding out that it's not your fault must
yeah,
be a huge relief. And that's a great place to start the rehabilitation.
yeah. I mean, ultimately, that's what it took. In 2016, my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she's fine now. But it was definitely that moment where that part of my brain that was again, that's fine, I've got time to fix this. It's okay that I can't fix it now. Suddenly had this event that it was like, I might not actually have time because I don't know what's coming. So that was really the catalyst, and it was the realization that you know the classic quote attributed to Einstein that says we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking that created them. It was those two things combined. It was like, okay, because I was a very rigid thinking, certain person, and I was very much the kind of, if you can't prove it to me, I've got no time for it, which
Man, you'd have been
didn't
a great
work.
guy to talk to.
It didn't work for me. And having that realization of saying, okay, so how I think is not working. So I have to find if I want to create change, it is incumbent on me to find out how I think, find out why I think that way, and understand a different way of thinking that I can bridge to and start entertaining different ideas. Because at the moment, I have no ideas because I'm so rigidly trapped in my thinking. So that all happened or started to happen in 2017, 2016, 17.
So say if someone comes to you and you're talking about, because everything you're talking about is so huge, it's a huge shift. So we were talking about number one, it's not your fault.
Mm.
And did you get to number two? I didn't write down a number two. What was your number two?
It is your problem.
It is your problem. Okay. So is that how you start with your clients? Someone's coming to you broken, or you can easily see they're stuck in some kind of mindset like you were.
Yeah.
How do you, like they've had something to break them in order to search for you because something's not working.
Yeah.
But how do you help them deconstruct in a kind way, because none of us want to fall apart in our current busy lives,
Yeah.
then build them back up? What is your strategy?
Yeah. So firstly, I would just say nobody is broken. What we are is deeply wounded. But there is no limit to how far we can heal from a wound. But some breakages are permanent. So none of us are broken. We're wounded. The thing for me is when I'm working with people, I've realized that it takes a leap of faith to recognize that you're capable of different, capable of more. And one of those leaps is that you deserve more, you deserve different. I had one client who couldn't work with the word deserving. It was such a trigger word for them that they just said, yeah, but I don't. So we spent a long time working away. Okay, well, let's quarantine that word, but let's find something that can work for you. The thing I tend to start with is, how do you want to be? Because most people, when they're looking to create change, are looking to solve the doing bit.
Yep.
They kind of go, okay, I hate my job. I need another job to go and do. And what we're really doing is substituting symptoms, because the problem is not the job. The problem is the misalignment with our deeper self through the expression of the job. So I'm always keen to understand how people feel currently, because they can identify what they want to get rid of, but taking away what we don't want doesn't give us what we do want, gives us a vacuum. And as we know, nature abhors a vacuum, and something will get sucked into that vacuum. And I can almost guarantee it will be old patterns of behavior, because they're so strong, because they're so well established, because they're so elastic. They will snap back unless we can really get connected with who we are and figure out how we want to be, and then figure out what. So I have a term, meaning before mechanism. So anything we do job wise, it could be I want a relationship, it could be I want to be a millionaire, it could be I want to be a CEO, it could be whatever it might be. Those are all mechanisms, and they are in service to a deeper meaning. So they create something for us through the mechanism. Where we struggle, and where I think this kind of empty success comes from, is we haven't bothered yet or been taught how to connect to the deeper meaning we are trying to create for ourselves, because it is never the mechanism in itself. It is, even when we speak to people and they kind of go, you know, I just want to be rich or famous or successful or whatever it might be. It's like, okay, but what is that going to give you that has real internal deep value? And you're absolutely right that this work, I think, is massive. It is big shift stuff. It isn't, I'm going to move the deck chairs on the Titanic. It's Titanic's going down. What are we going to do? It's going to take radical change. And I think I have a firm view of what it is we really want. And it's nowhere near as complicated as we're taught. I think there are 5 things. I think I said it on the first Tuesday talk. Mm-hmm. We want to be seen for who we really are. We want to be heard. We want to feel heard for what we have to say. We want to feel accepted for who we are and what we say. We want to feel loved, and we want to feel safe. Now, fundamentally, that is what we are trying to create for ourselves. And the reason we end up so unhappy, or the reason I ended up so unhappy, is because I was using mechanisms that were completely misaligned from who I really am. So it was just the mechanism for the mechanism's sake. I was in the jobs I was in, not for me. I was doing the daily tasks because somebody somewhere had a deeper meaning being served by me turning up to that job and delivering whatever it was I was delivering. It's only when we do that difficult work to actually get connected, kind of go, well, who am I? So when I go out the door and somebody sees me, really sees me, I feel it, and I go, okay, it's okay to be me. I don't have to pretend to be somebody I'm not, because the energy required for that eventually will burn us out.
So it's interesting about the things that you say that we want: the seen, heard, accepted, loved, and safety.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that we need to get it from ourselves first before we can accept it from others?
100%. 100% might be going a bit bold, because I think
7.3.
Because I think what happens is the majority of it is finding a way to be at peace with with ourselves. And we're brought up to judge ourselves unbelievably harshly.
Yes.
And we're taught to think of ourselves as having something wrong with us. It's like how I hear people all the time. I used to say it all the time. It's like, oh my God, what is wrong with me? That thought popped into my head. What is wrong with me? Or we can't create the change we want. We can't stop doing something that isn't to our benefit, drinking too much or eating the wrong foods or whatever it might be. And we say, I don't understand what's wrong with me. Where there's nothing wrong with you. You're just being a human being. We're very complicated. We're very nuanced. All of these things, if we're doing it, if we're thinking it, if we're saying it, if we're experiencing it, it's just because we're human. And so having this kind of blanket ring fence, there is nothing we can think, say, do, or experience that is not simply part of being a human being, then for me, it alleviates the blame element. Because this is just part of, I can't avoid it. I'm a human being. This is going to happen. But what do I want to do with it now? When I recognize it, when I identify it, it's not working for me. So what do I want to do with it? Can I get curious? Can I get compassionate? Can I start to see who I really am and recognize when I'm judging myself, and not judge myself for judging myself, but recognizing this is the conditioning, it's the blueprint, it's the fact I'm a human being. Okay, so I've got a lot to deal with simply by getting to 48. Fine. How am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to show myself compassion. I'm not going to judge myself. I'm going to exercise a bit of curiosity. I'm going to sit there. I'm going to go, well, I wonder what I can learn about myself, about other people, whatever it might be, in this moment. But I think it starts internally. Can I connect through my compassion and curiosity to that voice inside of me that is saying, let me out. I want to be seen. I want to be heard. And can I spend time with the parts of me that were wounded when I was younger, that have built the armor that I'm now weighed down by? So yeah, it does start internally. The reason I kind of backed off the 100% is because I think from time to time you meet people who see you in a way you cannot yet see yourself. And when you meet those people, it has a miraculous effect. And you have a choice in that moment to, depending on how far down the journey you are, we either dismiss them as fantasists, or we go, well, maybe there's something in that. Maybe I can be compassionate and curious about that as well.
Did you have someone who saw you for who you really were that enabled you to stop judging yourself and see yourself with more compassion?
It's a really interesting one because I wouldn't have put it in that way at the time. I wouldn't have been able to articulate that. But my first yoga teacher offered me those windows of all that stuff you're telling yourself. It's not true. But did it with such, it wasn't overemphasizing it, but did it with such conviction and belief that it's like unconditional, you are enough, full stop. I'm not going to explain it. You are enough. What can you put down because you're enough? And so it was really small moments like that you kind of sit there going, am I enough? That doesn't seem right. But he'd say it again and again and again, and you kind of go, well, maybe I am enough. And it is just those those little cracks that allow a slither of light both in and out, that you then start going, well, I couldn't hide those anymore. It wasn't a case that you'd get a little crack and then I could cover it up. I was so desperate, I guess, that when those little chinks of light came, it was like, I'm going to hold on to that because, and this is the leap of faith. I think he's right.
Right.
I think I am enough, but I only think it. I haven't, I mean, I'm better at it now, but at the time it was like, I think he's right. I think we are all enough. I have to now work to embody that thought, to embody that sense of, it's not a thought. I know It just is.
Yeah, and that's so powerful. And I think I agree with your backing down on the 100% because
Mm,
as human beings, we're relational. So
absolutely.
we do care what other people think. We do that is our whole sensory body is built on kind of communicating, getting approval, all of that from outside. Even though we know the best way is to build our insides. So when
Mm,
we have someone who believes in us, that does have an impact, and that might be the catalyst for that internal change.
yeah.
I'm looking at the time and I could talk
Mm,
to you for hours and days. What I wanted to just go back to a little bit because I love the way you talk about word rehabilitation.
yeah.
And I know that when I speak to my clients, I really pay attention to how they describe their problem because that really gives you insight as to how they view themselves. So tell me more how you work on that word rehabilitation, like your example before about I don't deserve this.
Mm,
So how do
yeah.
you work your client through that? Because that's massive. That's a huge part of their inner talk that feeds their belief.
Yeah. So with something like deservedness, it's a really challenging uh problem to address because it is so deeply rooted. Um, but essentially um we'd recognize that we'd identify the word that either they're using that I don't like because I see it as a diminishing word. So I bring a lot of my own crap to my client. I know you're not supposed to as a coach. I'm always honest about it. And I
Yeah.
do say, look, for me, that word doesn't work. So an example of that rather than deservedness would be saboteurs, internal saboteurs. Doesn't work for me because a saboteur is intentionally trying to just destroy something. And I am not trying to destroy myself. There is no part of me trying to destroy myself. So the word doesn't work. So I quarantine the word. I go, I'm not going to use that word. What do I think is happening? Well, I think all of my saboteurs are protection mechanisms. They're just outdated and they just haven't got a clue. They haven't kept up with modern life and living. So I went through a phase where I had an incompetent close protection team because I could work with that. That was like, fine, they're not out to get me. They're just really bad at their job.
I love that incompetent
Yeah.
protection team.
Yeah. So I worked with that and I recognized what would be called saboteurs are. And I sat with them and I spent time reconnecting to on a kind of Jungian level with the inner child and all those things.
Like, you need some extra training.
Yeah, exactly. Or you need to retire is really what you need. You're too old. We don't need you anymore.
Good one. Yep, yep.
I can protect myself. I've got this. And so over the space of it was probably about 6 months, I was no longer triggered by the saboteur. It was simply the label of my internal protectors. So I can use saboteurs now, but for the period that I found it very difficult, you put it aside and you find something that works. So with deservedness, we started small, and we played around with worthy, lots of different ideas around um, ultimately it's the same idea, but sometimes a single word will be triggering, whereas another one isn't. So often it will be the pattern, or it will be triggered by the pattern that caused the initial belief that they're not deserving. So if somebody says you're not worthy, worthy will be the problematic word. If that's what you heard as a kid, that is more than likely going to be a problem. But deservedness might not be. In this, it was the other way around. So we just substitute until we find one that doesn't create such a visceral response. But it will create a reaction because it fundamentally sits in the same kind of topic. And we can trick our brains to a degree, but there's still that point where the brains are going, you're talking about deservedness. I know that. But we then sit with that discomfort and go, yes. And I am very much the anchor that says your feelings about this word are not a reflection of the truth. They're just the belief you think you believe. But there's the thing I really love is that what we think is true, what we believe and what we believe to be true has nothing to do with the truth. Nothing at all. Unless you talk about, if I throw this in the air, gravity will bring it to the ground. But when it's about us, nothing to do with the truth. They simply act as stabilizers so we can predict what is going to happen to us and what is going on around us. They're just this automation running that says, well, if that person says that, I can predict this, and the story I tell myself says this, therefore, this is the reaction that is most likely to help me survive. But those truths and beliefs have nothing to do with the truth. They are just another story, but they're a story told often enough that they get solidified, and they are the kind of trigger to the automation. So we look at how do we go in search of those? How do we pressure test them? How do we validate or invalidate them? And what do we put in its place? So my role is to hold a truth that I believe that the story they're telling themselves is not true. It doesn't reflect the reality of who they are. And then we explore what might.
The new blueprint they create is the new stories they tell themselves.
Correct. Yeah. And interestingly, I'm really cautious about stories because they're still stories. We're brilliant at filling in the gap. We take a tiny piece of information and create, Homer's works with it. For me, it's how do we distill it down? So the inalienable truths are 50, what I believe to be the base truth. So they are things like there's a choice in every moment. True. It might not be the choice you want to make. It might be a choice between two things you would rather not have, but there is a choice in every moment. That's just how it is. Another one is everybody is doing the best they can in the moment with what they have. And the nuance to that is there may be a million reasons why what they are able to give me in this moment is nowhere near the best they are capable of, but it is the best they can do in this moment. And if that is true, what I am doing in this moment is the best I can do in this moment. And if I don't like it, then it's the compassion, curiosity, get connected with yourself. Okay, well, what's going on? What is stopping me being who I want to be? So these inalienable truths, for me, then become the truths in the blueprint. So the emotional reaction is lessened because it's like, you might not like it, but tough. That's what it is. So what are you going to do? Are you going to resist what is, or are you going to embrace what is and then figure out what to do about it?
All big thoughts. And now everyone needs to walk through this blueprint framework.
Yep.
And so how can people get in touch with you, and how can people work with you?
Thank you. So the quickest and easiest way to get to see some of this work is to go and have a look on my website, which is wyndhamjames.com. On there is a write-up of the Blueprint philosophy. There are 6 YouTube videos. I have a YouTube channel as well, so the Blueprint Coach is on YouTube. There are a series of 6 videos that talk through the Blueprint philosophy. Each section of it is a different. So one will be about the 3 phases. One will be about identity. One is about truths and beliefs, stabilizers. So you can get an idea of why it's not your fault. And then there's also the 246 framework, which is the framework I work with my clients on, that underpins this deeper work to actually write a blueprint that honors who we really are. The inalienable truths I mentioned, when you go onto my website, I think there's a 30-second delay, and then you can sign up for a newsletter I have never sent and almost certainly won't ever send. But you get a free download of these 50 inalienable truths. And for me, they've been the bedrock. It's like, I don't think I can change these. I can wish them away, but it's a waste of energy. So my website, wyndhamjames.com, obviously School of Humankind, here we are.
Yeah.
But yeah, even if you just want to chat or you're interested in understanding a little bit more about it, there are connection links on my website.
And it's a pleasure to have you as part of our School of Humankind faculty. We're really pleased to have your mind as part of the voices that we are sending out. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much.
I just want to open for the audience that is here. If there are any questions or comments that you'd like to make at this time, you're very welcome to. No pressure. Let me know. Anyone would like to ask anything? John?
No, not from John.
He's typing.
There's no.
He's cheating.
Okay.
I was just gonna say that there's a lot to think about in there, and that was
Yeah.
only. It wasn't very long, and it's a lot to think about.
It really is. So it's absolutely, Jenny, and it is. This has taken me the best part of 10 years to get to this. Not only have all of this come into a shape that actually I can see as an entity, as a thing, but all of the steps I had to go through over the 6 or 7 years to get to a point where I could go, oh, I can see the pattern now, and I think it's true for everybody. And I think the framework, the 246 framework, I believe is applicable to any problem we have. Because of that, it has to be deeper. I'm not a point solution person. If somebody comes to me and says, really unhappy at work, we don't talk about work. Of course we do a little bit, but we get into what is the meaning you're trying to create in life? These are massive questions. And I reckon I would suggest is when people say, if you could give one thing somebody could do, I hate it because there is no one thing somebody can do. But the access point, that kind of first step is, I think, it's not our fault. Can we take the step that says, actually, there's so much going on. This is not my fault. It is my problem. Am I willing to take ownership of solving it? Because if we're not, we won't. But if we are, then we get into, okay, how do I do that? Compassion, curiosity, connection, awareness, acceptance, and then intentional action. But yeah, it is a lot. I'm very aware it's a lot.
So you're not going to solve my problems in.
No, I had a call with a client, a potential new client, first thing this morning, and after the hour, they said, "I really thought you were going to solve my problem today, but what you've really done is give me a lot to think about." And I was like, "Yeah, well, that's because you're trying to solve the wrong problem."
Yeah, and we get into our problems through years of thinking a certain way.
Yeah.
So if people are fortunate enough to work with you, you can save them 30 years of suffering.
Absolutely.
For what you've already learned. And
or I can't save them from the suffering, but I can give them a different perspective on it moving forward.
You can be the first little chink of light.
Exactly that. Yeah.
So with that, thank you so much again. Thank you to the audience.
Thank you very much.
And to those watching the replay, thank you for watching. I always have a great time with Wyndham. For more information on School of Humankind, go to our website, schoolofhumankind.com, sign up for our newsletter, and you'll find out all of the upcoming events, including talks like this wonderful one. So thanks again, and we will see everyone shortly. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.